Since the 1992 Earth Summit in Rio de Janeiro, Brazil, the future of the Amazon rainforest has been the focus of the world's attention. Global warming, biodiversity, indigenous culture, sustainability, and deforestation. These are now #1 concerns in the world today. This is the Brazilian Amazon. The beauty, nature untouched by man, and the beast, man's destruction and industrial development.
"25 school students and volunteers from the UK travelled to the Amazon to ask the question, if these are the world's concerns, where do people fit in? Our journey took us 10,000 kilometres across 6 states and 3 time zones. We travelled by boat, road and plane, and I think we all experienced the most action-packed, exciting and mind-blowing 4 weeks of our lives.
How'd you say, the bottom has fallen out of my world in a lot of respects.
Life in the forest wasn't what any of us expected. Even the fittest members of the group were horrified at the distance a rubber tapper has to walk each day between the 300 trees he would need to tap to get enough rubber to make a measly 12 reais a week, about £6. There are about 30,000 rubber tappers throughout the Amazon, and they're considered well off compared to the estimated 400,000 subsistence farmers who don't even have rubber to sell. Here, it was all the same. Tree after tree after tree. Walking through the forest for 10 minutes was nice, but to live here, gross. How people cope here is incredible, but that's really all they do, it's just surviving. Even when we go camping, we take our nice things, gas stoves and everything. They don't even have these. They use clay ovens to cook in, and there are no microwaves or toasters for a snack. Huts with wooden floors and hooks for hammocks might be okay for holidays or the beach, but not to grow up in. We went with some of the guys who used to tap rubber but couldn't make a living from it now, to a small clearing where they grow and grind manioc to make flour. They used the most backward technology. You couldn't even call it a machine, just a wheel with stones to grind the roots. We learned a lot from the rubber tappers we talked to. Pedro told us about what he called the romantic view of the forest.
There are some leaders of the rub tapper movement who believe that we should not better our condition and standard of living. But most believe that we have a right as citizens to have one day a place to live, to have a TV, if possible, to even have a swimming pool, a car to go to the city. I think people have a very romantic view, believing that the rubber tapper should not change. There are some NGOs who want the Amazon to be a sanctuary, untouched. Because of this, a new deforestation law was created so that even as leaseholders, we cannot even cut down one tree. Only the property owners can cut down trees.
It's obvious to me why a lot of people want to and do leave the forest, because it's a hellish way of life. We could only stand it for a day or so, and it's not as though we're total Barbie dolls or whatever. We just couldn't live here. People do move away, even though a lot of people say, oh, you must stay in the forest and carry on living this way. It's your culture, it's close to nature, it's tradition.
We believe that we don't have the conditions to live in the city, because there isn't always work. We don't have the professional to sell in the city, because in the city only people who have had the opportunity to study can get work. Rubber tappers have never had the schools in the rural interior to study and to get a job in the city. Preservation of the forest is important, because we cannot really live without it. But we also need a little development, because we live in a precarious situation. It's very difficult for us to live here.
Yes, we are adaptable and can cope with pretty bad situations. But do we need to? And should anyone have to cope? A lot of people advocate extractivism, meaning farming forest products like rubber, fruits and nuts, and living off them as an alternative to deforestation and mechanised agriculture as a way of preserving the environment. But that's the problem. This is subsistence farming, a hand-to-mouth existence, considered good because it will save the forest, not because it will give people a decent way of life.
Yesterday, we spent the morning visiting Embrapa, which is a cloning plant, basically. They're cloning rubber trees, coffee plants, things like this, in order to try and develop the best brand of rubber plant and coffee beans. This is an attempt to boost the commercial viability of these products, but as we were informed yesterday, it is apparently failing. The rubber tree market has collapsed, making the clones that they've actually produced unsellable.
It's ridiculous. Everywhere you look alongside the few roads that do exist, land has been cleared so that people can run cattle and try and farm. But these lone trees are left standing and they die anyway. They can only hinder mechanised cultivation, not that the farmers have the agricultural equipment they need here, which is why they have to burn, to try and keep down regrowth and fertilise the soils, just to have a grass crop. We learnt that the stories we'd heard at home about the burnings were incredibly exaggerated. Most burning is simply to clean already deforested areas.
Do desenvolvimento sustentável.
The only people who come here are from the Federal Environmental Agency, IBAMA. They come to the training center and give course and talk about the new laws, how to preserve the forest, how we don't need to burn the forest. But they don't come to our house and see how we live.
From our visit, it became clear to us that there's no way that environmental concerns could have come from people living in the Amazon, but from people in a luxurious position not having to live like this.
I would say that the strongest forces are urban southern Brazil and international forces. I mean pressures. That's why people in the Amazon often feel bereft of control of their own areas. It's very common for something to come out of Brasilia or Rio or Sao Paulo. Or it can be a response from the executive branch, typically to international pressure.
To impose environmental ideas on people who are living below the poverty line or to celebrate this way of life is truly disgusting.
Completam-se 10 anos da morte de Chico Mendes.
O desmatamento da floresta.
We visited a lot of NGOs. Most of them wanted to help people in the forest, but they all seemed to accept that living in the forest was the way things would always be.
Everyone there was saying we have to preserve rubber tappers' lives as a cultural thing. And I mean, I feel sorry for rubber tappers, basically.
We were taken by our guides from Emeta and Funai, the National Indian Assistance Foundation, to meet the Gavio Indians on this reserve. They clearly weren't celebrating traditional ways of life.
It is very good to know how the white man works. We have a very big, very good project in the Gavion settlements. A lake where we are going to put 16,000 fish, chicken coops, a corral, storage for our cereals, rice, corn. And we are working through our project, which, thanks to Emater and Funai, is helping us to pursue the work we are doing now better. It's very good for us to follow your religion. I believe that these NGOs, which say they help the Indian community through resources, through governments, let's say they work with the Gavion, they do not leave one sign that they have been in the Gavion areas. They did not leave one plant, not one Indian health worker, not educated, one Indian.
We've also visited an Indian reserve, and I was really shocked to hear the regulations that are put on people that live in Indian reservations. They're tied to their land, they're not allowed to, they don't own it, so they can't sell it, and they're only allowed basic subsistence farming, and so they can't develop at all, and they'll be kicked off the land, which that seems medieval to me.
A gente está aqui praticando o diário da manhã na prática,
These
né?
Indians are from 4
E
tribes.
depois
They
do
travelled
café,
miles to this
das
centre
9
to learn
horas até às
Portuguese
11h30,
so that they can talk to each
na
other,
teoria.
trade, and not get ripped off. We asked them what they felt their biggest problem was. We thought they'd talk about the white man, intrusions and ranchers. But no, the first thing they said they needed was transport and roads.
One of our biggest problems is transport. We have no way of getting our produce to markets further away, and little money for fuel to get even to the nearest town. The only way to get to a hospital in an emergency is by plane. You radio it in the morning, and if you're lucky, the plane arrives at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, which can be too late. And to get to this course took 1 month by canoe, sometimes pulling it when there is no water, and I get burnt by river insects. And then it takes another month to get home again.
The building of this road, the infamous BR317, has been held up because of environmental pressure. It was going to go through Brazil, across Peru, to a port on the Pacific coast, opening up a whole trade route for Brazil to markets in Asia. On our long bus journeys, we had a lot of discussions. It was hard because it was bumpy, but it was good. We weren't like tourists, we were arguing and learning. Our first big discussion was about indigenism, the Indians and their way of life. I don't think you should call this their culture. I mean, you wouldn't call people living in a cardboard box in Victoria British culture. People do it because of their situation. Manaus, an industrial centre in the heart of Amazonas, was like arriving in a different world. We took an eco boat ride to the meeting of the rivers Negro and Solimões and sampled the caipirinhas in this thriving city. It was just so obvious that this was better, that Manaus didn't develop like this from extractive techniques. It's just sad that people don't accept this fact, especially when there's so much forest. Preserving it all seems so pointless.
The state of Amazonas still retains 97% of its original forest cover.
Flying east to Belém from Manaus, we were taken to Albus aluminium plant and then to an eco-island for a stay with school students at an experimental environmental education school called Escola Bosque. The contrast was really stark. You just know that the industry is where the wealth will be made.
Sustainable development. That came with Eco 92 in Rio de Janeiro. The expression was used for a long time, but now it's losing its strength. We don't have a clear idea how to put all the things together. What we know is that we have a natural resource. That's the bauxite. We have a natural resource in hydroelectric power. It is the nature of man to produce. If the resources are here, what we think we have to do is to produce without affecting too much the environment. Is that possible? We are not sure, but the Amazon has other resources that can be better exploited than the mining itself. But the iron ore is there, and it should be exploited. You can't just leave it there. We have to exploit natural resources the best way, using the ultimate technology.
We are learning about ecotourism and the environment here because we have a real problem of poverty. And I think learning about and then developing ecotourism could be a way to help us get out of this poverty and develop the area.
Escola Bosque was sad, everyone buying into a dream. We just knew lots of tourists wouldn't come here, not unless you hide the poverty. I mean, people don't decide on their holidays due to their environmental views. They want beautiful places, but they also want relaxation and luxury as cheaply as possible. Travelling by boat down one of the main Amazon tributaries, the River Tocantins, was fantastic. The governor let us use his boat, so he felt really spoiled. The river is so wide and the expanse of forest so incredibly beautiful. Until you see people living in poverty on the banks, the riverinios, and it doesn't look quite so gorgeous anymore. Downriver we arrived in Tucuruí, a town which took off with the development of a dam. The dam supplies over 6 million people with electricity. We learned about people who've been displaced by the dam, 2,500 of them, and the flooding problem. I think it made us reflect on things a lot. We felt it was not a reason to oppose the dam though, but meant there must be proper compensation. We spoke to an NGO and trade union concerned with the effects of the dam.
What also worsens the social situation is the fact that we still don't have medical posts in the settlements, in the rural areas. And there is also a road problem, because families have a problem with their produce, to sell it, to bring what they produce to the city. And with the case of sickness, to get to the city is difficult. I would not say that life would be better without the dam. I'm not against progress. I think development is progress. People need energy. I only think that they should think before they do it. Do surveys to know where it would affect. Do a disappropriation scheme before. After completing all this process, then you can think about the construction of the dam. But yes, the dam should have been built.
We did a survey to find out the views of people our age who live here. Everyone was for the dam and the development it had brought, and they wanted to help displaced people as well. Most of the time we hear how bad these big mega projects are from people who assume they know what's best for everyone. Some of the group visited the Carajás mining area, run by a company called CVRD, which has the largest iron ore mine in the world. Carajás was discovered when people flying over the region noticed large unforested areas. These were found to be kanga, which is iron ore-enriched soil on which the forest cannot grow. We visited the school here, which was incredibly well equipped compared to anywhere else we'd been. The school students felt the mine was really important for the region and the nation, especially because of the jobs it created. The trucks shifting the ore were amazing. They cost $2 million each. They were the biggest we'd ever seen. A change of tyres cost $180,000. The biggest thing that struck us when we got to Brasilia was the human ingenuity, a city planned and built in 4 years. It showed us the enormous potential Brazil has and what can be done. Even the British Embassy, where we were given lunch and badly needed use of their swimming pool, was wonderfully designed. We liked the quote on the wall in the town and felt people should be able to choose to live here, not forced to stay in the forest by their circumstances. We visited IBAMA, the Brazilian Institute for the Environment and Renewable Resources, where we had a really fascinating discussion.
I think we are too poor to think about, to worry about global problems. We don't have money to keep up the standard of life of our people. Of course, when you receive pressure from the international community because there are burning trees, and this is causing global warming, of course a lot of people here are worried about that. But we are trying to get them to stop burning the trees, not because of the global warming, but because it causes problems for the airport, and people are getting sick from the smoke. But it's not our main objective to reduce global warming. First, the people.
In Rio, we explored Rocinha. It was not what we'd expected.
My name is Rejane Reis. I am favela guide. And the favela that I always come with people is this one, Rocinha, the biggest one in South America.
I live in Rocinha on Road 2, where I live in a poor area. But the houses are not so poor, not made of wood. There are parts of Rocinha where houses are poor, made of wood. Families do not have good conditions.
Talking about the Rocinha community, it's a good favela. Generally, there isn't as much violence as outsiders think. Those who live in Rocinha feel it's peaceful and calm.
When we came to Rio, that was nothing like we expected. The favelas, even just the city itself, it was nothing like we'd imagined it to be. Not spectacular, either in its greatness or its problems, such as poverty, crime. None of these were very prevalent at all. The favelas were the same. They were actually very friendly, very welcoming places. We felt quite unthreatened, quite at home there. Fair enough, they're not places you want to live.
People talk about the extremes of wealth in Rio, the poverty of the shanty towns on the one hand, and the rich businessmen with their apartments near the beach. It doesn't seem a fair description at all. Rio doesn't seem excessively glamorous or rich. The shops are cheap. It's not glittery. The extremes weren't there. I think this sort of demonisation of the Brazilian middle classes avoids the development issue and the need for investment. People say, look at these terrible shanty towns and these rich Brazilians with big cars keeping all the money to themselves, instead of saying, look at Brazil's resources, its huge potential. Everyone could have more.
I think it's been a really successful trip. We've seen so much, we've learnt so much, we've discussed so much.
4 weeks in Brazil, I think this trip has probably been the most interesting 4 weeks of my life.
I want to say that it was a great experience to me.
I feel frustrated by the amount of unfulfilled potential that we've seen. We went to Brasilia and we saw how man can manipulate nature for the betterment of man. We saw an amazing city which is built out of the jungle. We've come to Rio and we've seen a place that's so alive, so developed and so amazing, coupled with shanty towns 10 minutes drive away.
A lot of the issues that seem so pertinent when you're in the West and so important just fall into insignificance when you're out here. Things like the global warming effect, deforestation of the rainforest, it means nothing compared to the lives of the people and the improvement of the way of life of the people in this area. The actual difference between opinions and reality is huge.
I think we're really beginning to bond as a group. We cease to be a whole set of individuals and we're quite a tight little unit now, I think. So that's going quite well. That's about it, I guess.